Following the arbitration at Adru, the fragile unity within Ali's ranks shattered, giving birth to a radical new faction. These were individuals who, despite their initial fervent support for Ali, now felt deeply betrayed by his acceptance of human judgment in what they believed should have been solely God's domain. They famously declared, "La hukma illa lillah." There is no judgment save that of Allah. This group, soon to be known as the Khawarij, meaning those who went out, or seceded, fundamentally rejected the legitimacy of the arbitration's outcome and, by extension, Ali's leadership for having agreed to it. They viewed the arbitrators and anyone who accepted their decision as apostates. The ideology was uncompromising and absolute. Only God's law could rule, and any deviation from it warranted immediate condemnation and even armed opposition. Ali faced an unprecedented crisis. His efforts to explain the necessity of the arbitration to prevent further bloodshed fell on deaf ears. The Khawarij's rigid interpretation of religious doctrine created an insurmountable ideological chasm. This internal schism was perhaps even more perilous than the external conflict with Muawiyah, as it challenged the very foundation of his authority and threatened to tear the nascent Muslim community apart from within. The emergence of the Khawarij presented Ali with a profoundly complex and agonizing dilemma. These were not external enemies like Muawiyah's forces. They were former allies, even devout followers, who now condemned him as an apostate. Their secession wasn't just a political disagreement, it was a religious one, fueled by a rigid and unyielding interpretation of Islamic law. This made reconciliation incredibly difficult, as their very core belief was that a compromise with Ali was akin to abandoning God's will. Ali, ever the pragmatist and a man deeply committed to preserving the unity of the Muslim community, initially sought dialogue. He dispatched his trusted companions to reason with them, to explain the nuances of the arbitration, and to appeal to their shared faith and history. He argued that the arbitration, though flawed in their eyes, was a necessary evil to avert further bloodshed among Muslims, a greater sin. He reminded them of the Quranic verses that called for unity and forgiveness. However, the Khawarij, entrenched in their zealotry, largely refused to listen. Their numbers swelled as disaffected individuals, disillusioned by the political turmoil and seeking a purer form of Islam, flocked to their banner. They established their own encampments, most notably at Narawan, where they began to preach their doctrine of uncompromising justice and actively denounce Ali. Their rhetoric grew increasingly hostile, culminating in acts of violence against those who did not subscribe to their extreme views, including innocent travelers and even other Muslims who disagreed with their interpretations. This escalating aggression left Ali with little choice. The Khawarij were no longer just a dissenting voice. They were a direct threat to the stability of the burgeoning Islamic State and the safety of its citizens. Reluctantly and with a heavy heart, Ali prepared his forces to confront them. He knew that engaging them in battle, despite their internal origins, was a tragic necessity to prevent wider chaos and to protect the innocent. The Battle of Narawan, though a decisive military victory for Ali, was a deeply painful and symbolic moment, marking a further splintering within the early Muslim community that would have long-lasting consequences. This phase highlights the tragic turn of events where dialogue failed and confrontation became inevitable. Would you like to delve into the Battle of Narawan itself? or perhaps explore the long-term impact of the Khawarij's emergence on Islamic history, and thought the tragic climax of the confrontation with the Khawarij unfolded at Nahrawan. Ali, having exhausted all avenues of peaceful resolution, was left with no choice but to engage them militarily. Despite his deep reluctance to shed Muslim blood, even that of those who had turned against him, the Khawarij's escalating violence against innocent civilians and the open rebellion against legitimate authority left him with a stark reality. Inaction would lead to widespread anarchy and the disintegration of the nascent Islamic State. Ali approached this battle not as a vengeful pursuit, but as a necessary surgical intervention. Before the engagement, he again offered them an amnesty, urging them to lay down their arms and return to the fold. He even offered passage to those who wished to leave the battlefield. However, their fanaticism had hardened their hearts. They refused his overtures, believing themselves to be the sole true believers, and all others, including Ali, to be astray. The battle itself was swift and decisive. Ali's disciplined forces, though smaller in number than the initial Khawarij gathering, were well organized and led. The Khawarij, despite their fierce zeal, were largely decimated. Only a small fraction managed to escape, carrying with them the embers of their ideology. The immediate aftermath of Nahrawan was a temporary relief for Ali. The internal threat had been neutralized, allowing him to refocus on the ongoing conflict with Muawiyah. However, the victory was a Pyrrhic one. The bloodshed at Nahrawan, even against a rebellious faction, deeply scarred the Muslim community. It solidified the image of Ali as a leader forced to fight his own people, and it fueled the resentment of the surviving Khawarij, who now vowed vengeance. This battle, rather than ending the internal strife, merely transformed it, sowing the seeds for future assassinations and perpetual discord within the Islamic world. The victory at Nahrawan, while militarily decisive, did little to quell the underlying ideological ferment. Instead, it arguably intensified the Khawarij's hatred and transformed their rebellion from a mere political dissent into a deeply personal quest for vengeance against Ali. The surviving Khawarij, though few in number, were now even more radicalized and scattered, making them a diffuse but potent threat. They saw Ali not just as mistaken, but as a legitimate target for assassination, believing that his removal was essential to restore what they perceived as true Islamic rule. This period was marked by a pervasive sense of instability and disillusionment across the Muslim lands. The prolonged civil strife, the unresolved conflict with Muawiyah in Syria, and now the internal threat of the Khawarij had taken a heavy toll. Ali, despite his profound piety and unwavering commitment to justice, found himself increasingly isolated. Many who had initially supported him were weary of the endless conflicts, while others, particularly in Iraq, grew ambivalent or even resentful of the continuous demands of war. It was in this climate of profound tension and simmering vengeance that the ultimate tragedy struck. In 661 CE, 40 AH, while heading to lead the morning prayers in Kufa, Ali ibn Abi Talib was assassinated by Abd al-Rahman ibn Muljam al-Khariji. This act was not an isolated incident, but part of a larger coordinated plot by several Khawarij to simultaneously eliminate Ali, Muawiyah, and Amr ibn al-As, believing that by removing the leaders of the civil conflict, peace would finally return to the Muslim community. Only Ali's assassination was successful. Ali's martyrdom sent shockwaves through the nascent Islamic world. It marked the end of the rightly guided caliphate, Rashidun Caliphate, an era characterized by direct, albeit often turbulent, leadership by companions of the Prophet Muhammad. His death not only brought an end to his caliphate, but also paved the way for a fundamental shift in Islamic political history, ushering in the Umayyad dynasty and a new era of dynastic rule. His legacy, however, as a paragon of justice, wisdom, and courage, continued to inspire generations. The assassination of Ali ibn Abi Talib, RA, was a watershed moment in Islamic history, far more than just the tragic end of a revered leader. It marked the definitive conclusion of the rightly guided caliphate and ushered in an era of profound political and religious transformation. The ideal of a caliph, chosen by consensus and deeply rooted in the prophetic tradition, began to wane, giving way to a more centralized and eventually hereditary form of governance. With Ali's death, the path was cleared for Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan to consolidate his power and establish the Umayyad Caliphate. Muawiyah, who had long governed Syria, moved swiftly to gain recognition, effectively shifting the capital of the Islamic Empire from Kufa in Iraq to Damascus in Syria. This transition was not merely a change in leadership, it represented a fundamental shift in the nature of Islamic rule, moving from an elected system towards a dynastic one, where power was passed down through family lines. Ali's brief but tumultuous caliphate left an indelible mark. His unwavering commitment to justice, his profound knowledge of Islamic law, and his personal piety resonated deeply with many, even those who disagreed with his political strategies. He became a symbol of ideal Islamic leadership for certain segments of the Muslim community, particularly for the Shia, who view him as the rightful successor to Prophet Muhammad and the first Imam. His struggle against corruption and deviation from Islamic principles continues to inspire. The aftermath of Ali's caliphate and the rise of the Umayyads set the stage for enduring schisms within Islam. The political divisions that began with a dispute over succession solidified into distinct theological and sectarian identities. The Sunni-Shia divide, though its roots are earlier, became more pronounced in the wake of these events, with differing interpretations of leadership, authority, and historical legitimacy. The legacy of this period continues to shape the Islamic world to this day, underscoring the profound impact of these early political struggles on religious identity and societal structure. The events following the Siffin arbitration, culminating in Ali's assassination and the rise of the Umayyad dynasty, weren't just isolated historical incidents. They laid the foundational groundwork for enduring divisions that continue to shape the Islamic world today. The political and theological schisms born in this era reverberated through centuries, influencing everything from jurisprudence to cultural identity across various Muslim communities. The most prominent and lasting impact was the formalization of the Sunni-Shia divide. What began as a dispute over political succession evolved into distinct religious interpretations. Sunnis generally acknowledge the legitimacy of the Rashidun caliphs, including Ali, and the subsequent Umayyad and Abbasid dynasties, focusing on the consensus of the community. Shi'as, on the other hand, uphold Ali and his descendants as the rightful spiritual and political successors to Prophet Muhammad, believing in a divine appointment of leadership, imamate. This fundamental disagreement led to the development of separate legal schools, theological doctrine, and rituals, creating two major branches of Islam that often view history and authority through different lenses. Furthermore, this period established precedents for political power dynamics within Islamic states. The shift from a consultative caliphate to hereditary rule under the Umayyads, while initially controversial, set a pattern for many subsequent Islamic empires. It raised fundamental questions about legitimacy, justice, and the role of religious authority in governance. Questions that philosophers, scholars, and revolutionaries have grappled with for over a millennium. Even in contemporary times, understanding these early conflicts is crucial. Modern geopolitical landscapes in the Middle East, the rhetoric of various movements, and internal debates within Muslim societies often draw upon or are influenced by the narratives and interpretations of this tumultuous era. The figures of Ali, Muawiyah, and the Khawarij remain potent symbols, representing differing ideals of leadership, justice, and faith. The legacy of their struggles continues to be debated, revered, and reinterpreted, underscoring the profound and lasting impact of these historical moments on the collective consciousness of Muslims worldwide. As we conclude the narrative of the events following the Siffin arbitration and their impact on the present day, it's crucial to consider the lessons to be learned from this tumultuous period. Early Islamic history, particularly this chapter, is not just a recounting of past events, but a rich source for understanding human nature, politics, and faith. One of the most profound lessons is the danger of extremism and inflexibility in religious interpretation. The emergence of the Khawarij demonstrates how a rigid interpretation of religious texts can lead to fragmentation and violence, even among those who share a common faith. This underscores the importance of moderation, scholarly discourse, and the power of dialogue within religious communities. Furthermore, the narrative illuminates the immense challenges of leadership during times of crisis. Ali ibn Abi Talib, despite his unwavering commitment to justice and his deep piety, faced extraordinary difficulties in maintaining unity and peace. This highlights the complexity of leadership when ideologies and political ambitions collide, and how even the best intentions can lead to unintended consequences. Ultimately, understanding these historical events is paramount for fostering peace and mutual understanding today. Knowing the origins of the Sunni and Shia divide helps to bridge misunderstandings and promote dialogue between these major branches of Islam. History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but it offers patterns and vital lessons that we can apply to navigate contemporary challenges. This section concludes our comprehensive narrative, from the Siffin arbitration to its enduring impact. Do you have any final questions, or can we conclude this discussion now? As we draw this detailed exploration to a close, it's fitting to consider not just the historical events themselves, but also the profound legacy of leadership from this pivotal era. The figures of Ali ibn Abi Talib, Muawiyah, and even the Khawarij, though often viewed through the lens of conflict, each represent distinct approaches to leadership and belief that have shaped Islamic thought for centuries. Ali's leadership remains a powerful archetype. His commitment to justice, his intellectual depth, and his personal piety set a standard for many. His struggles highlight the immense burden of leadership in a time of ideological fragmentation and political ambition. For the Shia, his caliphate symbolizes the pure, divinely guided leadership, while for many Sunnis, he embodies the ideal of a selfless and righteous ruler. His actions and words continue to be studied for their wisdom, courage, and moral fortitude. Muawiyah's rise and the establishment of the Umayyad dynasty, while marking a significant shift to a more centralized and dynastic form of governance, also demonstrated a pragmatic approach to state building and expansion. His ability to consolidate power and maintain stability in his territories, even amidst civil strife, offers a different perspective on leadership, one focused on political efficacy and the creation of a functional, albeit imperfect, empire. Even the Khawarij, despite their destructive actions, serve as a stark reminder of the power of conviction and the dangers of absolutism. Their unwavering commitment to their interpretation of divine law, however flawed in its application, underscores the deep spiritual fervor that can drive human actions and the constant tension between religious idealism and political reality. In essence, this era provides a rich tapestry of leadership styles and the complex interplay of faith, power, and human fallibility. Understanding these diverse perspectives, rather than simplifying them into a single narrative of good versus evil, allows for a more nuanced appreciation of Islamic history and its enduring influence on contemporary societies. The questions these leaders faced about legitimacy, justice, unity, and the proper role of governance in a religious community are questions that continue to resonate in various forms today.